We last learned about the New Realism and Fluxus movements and how they wanted to merge art and life, and we also learned about its stance on consumerism. Now we are going to learn about pop art. Pop art originated in Britain in the mid-1950s, then quickly followed in the United States. Pop art challenged the traditions of fine art by including imagery from popular culture, such as news and advertising. Its imagery was often taken out of context, isolated, and/or combined with unrelated material. It employs aspects of mass culture, such as advertising, comic books, and mundane cultural objects. Pop art may be viewed in part as a rebellion against abstract expressionism. Abstract expressionism was rooted in surrealism. Their work was personal and often had ambiguous imagery, if any imagery at all. They also believed that the medium used should not be hidden or disguised to create an illusion. For example, in Jackson Pollock's drip paintings, the viewer can see that the paint is paint, whereas pop artists were obvious and blunt with the ideas. They used imagery of consumer products or the pop culture to reflect the world around them, which would relate to the mass public. They used images that the average person would easily recognize from the everyday world around them. Their work was depersonalized and appeared to be created using mass-produced methods. This is considered to be the first pop art piece of work created and is now an iconic image. It is a collage on paper titled "Just What Is It That Makes Today's Homes So Different, So Appealing" from 1956 by British artist Richard Hamilton. Pop art was largely influenced by the works of Marcel Duchamp. Here we see a pinup girl and we also see a muscle man residing in their apartment. The muscle man is holding a Tootsie Pop, which is what helped to label the movement. There's also a can of ham and a fancy vacuum cleaner. And then on the lamp over here, we can see the Ford automobile emblem, along with other modern items of the day. And in the window, we can see a movie theater advertising the jazz singer. We can compare the muscle man to Adam and the pinup girl to Eve, both living in the modern paradise of their apartment, furnished with popular products of their day. This is a welded aluminum sculpture by Eduardo Palazzi titled Medea. The title refers to Greek mythology, and the cylindrical tubes is like the serpent in the Laocoon sculpture created during the Hellenistic era. However, it is also like many humanoid machines that were seen in science fiction movies in the 1950s and 60s. This is a painting by Peter Blake titled On the Balcony. Like Hamilton's collage, we see the inside of an apartment filled with modern references. The children are holding images of modern art. On the left is Matisse's On the Balcony. And placed throughout the painting are images from popular culture. For example, we see the Life magazine cover taking the place of one child's head right there. R.B. Kitaj was an American artist who lived in England. He is a difficult artist to categorize. His work during this time did not really fit into traditional concepts of pop art, but his unique style is powerful. I was lucky enough to see a retrospective of his work at the Philadelphia Museum a few years ago. Seeing a large body of work that one artist produces is very telling and allows you to really start to understand the full scope of their mindset and style. His style and skill is very impressive and captivating in person. Kitaj used strong linear marks combined with large flat areas of color. This image here shows a scene from a cafe in Paris with the philosopher Walter Benjamin right there. Kitaj was one of many artists who participated in the Post-it Note celebration of 3M's 20th anniversary. 3M is the company that makes Post-it Notes. For this event, he created the drawing titled After Rembrandt on a Post-it note. When auctioned on the internet in the year 2000, this charcoal and pastel drawing sold for $925. making it the most expensive Post-it note in history, which was recorded in the Guinness Book of World Records. David Hockney was a student of R.B. Kitaj at the Royal College. Hockney was extremely talented and enjoyed notoriety early in his career. With his granny glasses and peroxide hair, David Hockney invented himself to reflect the pop culture. He was popular and personified the self-indulgent style of the younger generation of the 1960s. Despite his appearance and public image, Hockney's work was not truly considered pop art. This piece, called A Bigger Splash from 1967, shows a swimming pool. This was an image that showed up frequently in his paintings of this time. This is a cool, crisp painting that uses flat colors to show the lifestyle of Southern California. Robert Rauschenberg was one of the leading artists in the American pop movement. Rauschenberg was one of the few artists that could take any material and turn it into art. During the 1950s, he used photography in one aspect or another in many of his works. This is a monoprint on exposed blueprint paper created by Robert Rauschenberg and his wife Susan Weil. It was a short-lived marriage that lasted from 1950 to 1953. This is a simplified and intriguing image of two figures fusing together. It was created by two people laying on special paper, then exposing it to light. Rauschenberg believed that painting related to both art and life. He felt that he couldn't make either, so he tried to place himself in the gap between art and life. He gathered objects from the world around him to incorporate into his art. This piece is titled Bed and is what he called a combine painting. A combine painting is the incorporation of objects from the world. This combine used a quilt and pillow that he drew and placed paint on in an abstract expressionistic manner. This is another combine painting called Monogram. It is one of his most famous pieces. In the center we see a stuffed Angora goat with a tire on it. There is a collage covering the base on which it sits. It can also be interpreted as a painting placed horizontally on the floor. And then here in the upper right corner, you could just see a better detail of the head of the Angora goat. This last piece we're going to look at by Robert Rauschenberg is an oil and silkscreen ink on canvas titled Estate from 1963. Here we see photographs that were from current newspapers and magazines. The images were commercially transferred onto silkscreens. In this piece, we see images of modern life with the street sign, the one-way and stop signs, and we can see that right here. And then just below that, we see the Statue of Liberty, and throughout the piece, we can see modern architecture. Now, to the lower right, we see Michelangelo's Sistine ceiling right here, which in of itself is not modern, but can still be viewed as being modern since it is still being seen by many tourists each year. In 1964, this image won the grand prize in the Venice Biennale. Afterwards, Rauschenberg had his friend destroy all the silk screens used to make this image. That way he wouldn't repeat the imagery in future works and appear redundant. Jasper Johns was born in South Carolina and moved to New York in the mid-1950s. Johns and Rauschenberg became close friends and were supportive of each other's artwork. This piece is titled Flag and is an encaustic oil and collage on fabric on mounted plywood. There is a detail just above my head. Now, encaustic means that wax, often beeswax, is used as a binder. The wax is heated until it becomes liquefied, then colored pigment is added to it. Here, Jasper Johns applied his colored wax in layers to create a sculptural quality that still has transparency to it. Johns said that he had a dream that he painted the American flag. That next day, he started making this piece. Embedded throughout the piece are newspaper clippings that give it a sense of history. It also reflects modern times and invites the viewer to take a closer inspection. When looking at this piece close up, one can see the many pieces of paper and the texture and the translucency of the wax and its drips. John's work bridged the gap between abstract expressionism and pop art during the 1950s. Johns made several versions of the American flag. He also made several versions of Target paintings. This one is called Target with Plaster Cast from 1955. Above the blue and yellow target are 9 wooden boxes with plaster cast body parts right here. The use of ready-made images by Jasper Johns gave him the freedom from compositional concerns. He didn't worry about what to put where. Johns' flags and targets made use of ready-made subjects. Jasper Johns once said, "I feel that works of art are an opportunity for people to construct meaning, so I don't usually tell what they mean. It conveys to people that they have to participate." Cy Twombly also knew Robert Rauschenberg, and it was Rauschenberg who suggested that Twombly study at Black Mountain College. It was there where he studied under Franz Klein and John Cage. In 1953, Cy Twombly served in the Army as a cryptographer, where he deciphered and used coded messages. He was a poet, painter, and sculptor. In this piece from 1969, we see what looks like mathematical figures and problems that are trying to be worked out. The slate gray makes the canvas look like a blackboard, and the white-shaped numbers and letters look as though they were made with white chalk instead of crayon and oil paint. Cy Twombly's works display the beauty of mark making and often contain quotes of classical myths and allegories. One aspect of the pop revolution was the integration of the arts with life. Now, we already talked about how happenings can take place anywhere, and started with an idea of what they wanted to do, but didn't rehearse anything and left their performances open to improvisation. Alan Caprow was an artist who created many happenings during the 60s. Abstract expressionism was important to Caprow, especially Jackson Pollock's paintings. Caprow felt that Pollock's drip paintings were important to his conceptualization of happenings because Pollock extended painting into the world. In this happening called Household, we see participants licking strawberry jam off the hood of a car that will eventually be set on fire. Caprow believed that the line between art and life should be kept fluid. He liked trying to blur the boundaries. Happenings were cutting edge and cool, but by the end of the 1960s, they weren't considered cool anymore, and even Caprow stopped using the term happening. This next artist, John Cage, was a composer who taught Cy Twombly and Jackson Pollock at the Black Mountain College. He also taught Caprow at the New School for Social Research in New York City. Cage bridged the gap between art and life through his experimental music that involved using everyday objects as instruments while incorporating unplanned or chance noises such as traffic, car horns, and audience responses. Here's an image from the video of his Water Walk performance from January 1960 on the then popular television show called I've Got a Secret. This is The Diner from 1964 to 66 by George Segal. Segal was originally an expressionistic figurative painter who found the medium too limiting and decided to begin making sculptures in 1958. He was very good friends with Caprow, who inspired him to create sculptures as a total environment. In 1961, while teaching an adult education class, one of his students gave him a box of dry plaster bandages. Segal began to experiment with them by applying them directly to his body. He soon began making casts of body parts and assembled them into complete figures. Segal provided environments for his body casts by placing them in chairs, benches, or placing them in situations. In this image, there is one figure sitting at the diner counter while an employee pours a cup of coffee. The counter is reconstructed from an actual diner counter. Segal made many of these figures doing various things and placed in various settings. Here he creates an environment that is a bit unnerving with its stillness, giving the figures a ghostly presence. Claes Oldenburg was an artist who created many works representing common foods, animals, and objects. He made the ordinary extraordinary. Here we see Claes Oldenburg seated in the store. This storefront in the Lower East Side of Manhattan is where Oldenburg made and sold items. By doing this, he avoided having to use a commercial gallery. The store was filled with sculptures representing cheap merchandise that he often saw in cafeterias and shops. He made them out of plaster-soaked cotton fabric called muslin, then placed over wire frames and painted. Oldenburg's store was a performance site, it was an environment, and it was a functioning store. It did not sell mass-produced items. This is one of his first soft sculptures titled Floor Cake, Giant Piece of Cake. It's made of synthetic polymer paint and latex on canvas. It's filled with cardboard boxes and foam rubber. Oldenburg created many of these soft sculptures, but he also worked in other materials and mediums. This is called Geometric Mouse. It's a fun, playful piece. It's a highly abstracted version of an organic subject, that being a mouse. Oldenburg made several versions of his geometric mouse in different sizes and colors. This is a crown in watercolor on paper titled Proposed Colossal Monument for Park Avenue, New York, Good Humor Bar. These proposed pieces challenged traditional designs of public sculptures that were commemorative and heroic, and replaced those traditional designs with irrelevant, often silly and amusing ideas for public sculpture. Jim Dine was born in Cincinnati. He was a graphic design artist and painter, and was one of the organizers of the first happenings, but decided that he was more interested in painting. Dine's father and grandfather were both hardware store merchants. He references himself and his family in his works by having tools and other hardware items in his pieces. This painting is titled Double Isometric Self-Portrait. Bathrobes and neckties were seen as self-portraits for Dine. Here we see two bathrobes in bold, flat colors in a confident stance. A robe, a bathrobe, or dressing gown, as it is sometimes called, makes dignity possible between a state of usual dress and undress. It can be viewed as being intimate and formal. And if you look closely, you can see two wooden handles suspended by chains right here. Here's one handle, and here's another. And they're suspended by chains with a metal hook at the top near the neck area. This hardware acknowledges his family. This next piece is an acrylic on Celotex. Celotex is a commercial composite paper that is used for inexpensive ceilings. Celotex is the support for Art Schwager's Destruction 3, which is the painting you see here, made in 1972. Richard Art Schwager made this painting based off of a black and white photograph. He was interested in facades or the front of buildings. This is a large diptych showing the demolition of the Grand Traymore Hotel in Atlantic City, New Jersey. By not showing the photograph but making a painting of the photograph, he is showing us an illusion of the event and not the reality of it. By showing us the photograph, that would have been giving us the reality of the event. One of Art Schwager's central themes is his ability to create tension between reality and illusion in his works. This painting, titled Wham! From 1963, is by Roy Lichtenstein. Here, Lichtenstein took a comic strip and enlarged it. It's a playful parody of the modern popular culture. Up close, you can see the Ben-Day dots that were used in the photomechanical production of comic books. This is a large painting over 13 feet in length. This is also a common scene that one would see when looking at a comic book about the heroes of World War II battles. This is titled Artist Studio, The Dance. It's another large painting over 10 feet in length. Here, Lichtenstein pays homage to the history of modernist art. In this case, It's of Matisse's Dance 2 painting. When one thinks of pop art, the first artist that comes to mind is usually Andy Warhol. Much like Salvador Dali made himself his art, so too did Andy Warhol. He was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and if you ever go to Pittsburgh, you can visit the Andy Warhol Museum. It is the largest museum in the United States dedicated to a single artist. Andy Warhol's works explored relationships between artistic expression, celebrity culture, and advertisement that increased by the 1960s. He was a prolific person who worked in several different mediums, including underground movies, although he is most well known for his silkscreen paintings. He also managed and produced the rock band The Velvet Underground, who had a large influence on future punk rock music. His studio, which was called The Factory, was a popular place where distinguished intellectuals, playwrights, bohemian street people, drag queens, Hollywood celebrities, and wealthy patrons would all hang out and socialize. Andy Warhol began as a commercial artist and, like Lichtenstein, started making paintings from popular comic strips. Warhol then started making art from popular advertising and commercial products such as Campbell's soup cans, Coke bottles, and Brillo cartons. He then started doing images of famous people and close friends. Here we see portraits that the two artists Andy Warhol and Jamie Wyeth made. These two artists were close friends and did a few portraits of each other. This is Warhol's Triple Elvis that sold at Christie's auction for $81.9 million. This auction took place on November 12, 2014. Elvis was viewed as a contemporary American folk hero and movie star. He also did portraits of other glamorous movie stars like Elizabeth Taylor and Marilyn Monroe. Here is a Marilyn Monroe. Warhol did not want the viewer to see any personal marks from the artist. In 1962, he began using a mechanical photo silk screening process. Warhol's adoption of a photo silk screening process underscores or emphasizes his desire to eliminate the artist's hand. By the late 1960s, Warhol, in his silver-sprayed painted wig that he wore, achieved cult status in New York. He became very famous and continued to make portraits into the 1970s. One of his most famous quotes was, "In the future, everyone will be world famous for 15 minutes." Andy Warhol died in New York in 1987 from complications that occurred after his gallbladder surgery. This painting by James Rosenquist is titled Portion of F111. It is an extremely large painting measuring over 86 feet long. To create F111, Rosenquist utilized skills he acquired as a billboard painter. It was named after an American fighter bomber. It has a series of fragmented images of destruction along with ordinary details such as a plate of spaghetti and a light bulb. The oddest image of this piece would have to be the grinning girl that is underneath a clear bullet-shaped hairdryer. This painting was designed to fill a room from wall to wall so the viewer would be surrounded by his imagery. This piece has traveled around the world on exhibition, and it has become not only known for its condemnation of war, but also as one of the most important works of the pop era. Now, Sister Carita took her Catholic religious vows and joined the Order of the Immaculate Heart College. She studied art in Los Angeles before she took her vows and afterwards ran the art program at the Immaculate Heart College. She was largely influenced by Andy Warhol's paintings of Campbell's soup cans. Sister Carita was struck by the bold colors, simple graphics, and commonplace themes. She soon started to create work in a similar style, but gave it her own twist. She made work to serve her personal views. Sister Carita used her pop-inflected screen prints to spread her message of faith and social justice. This painting, titled Enriched Bread, looks like the Wonder Bread brand. However, her message in this piece is about the wonder of faith in a world that has been overwhelmed by injustice and devastated by war. One of the sentences reads, "Some will say this hope lies in a nation, others in man." And that sentence could be seen right here. Wayne Thiebaud was a California artist. This piece is titled Pie Counter from 1963. Thiebaud here depicts perfect but unappetizing pieces of pie as if they were placed under harsh light on a cafeteria counter. Thiebaud said that his works reflect his nostalgia and affection for the subjects he paints. In this case, it's pies. Others have stated that he is condemning or making a statement about the American culture.